Hi there, Pat here again. So this week, as a continuation from last week, when I had read the prologue for the Nightland Knights Firebranded, I'm going to continue into the book and read chapter 1, which is called Martyrdom. So once again, this is from the Nightland Knights Firebranded. It's my book. And I'm just going to flip to the page here. And then we can begin. Chapter 1, Martyrdom. A harsh cold gust of wind blew through the great valley, a land that is filled with lush green hills and gentle crystal streams, which snake down from the lower mountains into a low-lying, fertile valley. It tore at the grass on the hills, ripping patches of grass blades out of the earth, scattering them throughout the area. Friedrich, a blond-haired, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, decided to pitch camp for his forces so that they may rest for the night, after a week-long march through the lower mountains. He violently grabbed an old, war-torn Nightlandian banner and carelessly tossed it into the fire to feed it. He then sat upon the grassy earth and allowed his conscience to burn away among the flames, watching the faded black banner with the white cross and yellow and white star on its center slowly turn to ash. His eyes glazed over, and he began to think. War is a dangerous folly. Many have died for no purpose over these past few months. Peace will in no way come soon. I must have some rest here, however. After an hour, he gazed up at the stars. It was a clear night, and with their position on one of the lower hills of the great valley, one could see the entire universe before them, without a single cloud in the sky. The wind began to blow nicely, with a slightly warm feeling as it touched his skin. However, once the wind decided to change direction temporarily, the smoke blew right into Friedrich's face, forcing him into a coughing fit. His eyes burned like the fire he was initially tending for a moment. Tears streamed out of them. He breathed a sigh of relief after the brief situation passed, however, when he saw his dark curly-haired, broad-shouldered friend, Wolfgang, steadily walking with long strides up the hill towards him, fiddling with his neatly kept beard. Wolfgang appeared to be holding his blackened steel full helm, with its vibrant yellow and gold-studded cross design on the visor under his arm. "Shouldn't you be tending to the local women or something while the night is young, oh dear Romeo?" Friedrich asked mockingly, smirking as he turned back to the fire. Wolfgang let out a half-hearted laugh as he made his way to crouch down next to his friend, while Friedrich began to fiddle with the dampened stick, twirling it about in the open flame, thinking. "The better question is, why aren't you, Lord Friedrich, son of our vanished leader, King Rebel?" Wolfgang retorted, as he fell back on his hands and began dreamily looking up at the night sky, ignoring the smell of the smoke as it blew near him. Friedrich grabbed a handful of grass and launched it forcefully into the fire. His face cringed with anger for a brief moment, then softened. "I'm not sure what the outcome of tomorrow is going to be, friend. I had a dream recently while marching that I would fall in the middle of the field, near a small patch of flower trees and wine bushes, along one of the dirt roads," he said, sighing sadly. Wolfgang looked at him nervously. "I will not lose my closest friend, not if I can help it." Friedrich stared straight ahead, at the stars, seeming to be slightly more at peace. "How do you think the men would fare when I pass?" he asked warily. Wolfgang rose to his feet and put his hand up to his head to hail his befriended commander. "They will deem you a martyr, and rise up around you, with ever-increased strength to avenge your befallen self, sir," he bellowed. Thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was coming in from the sea. Wolfgang and Friedrich looked up in concern at the fast-approaching storm. The black thunder clouds towered up in the shape of hammers, flashes of yellow and blue lightning creating blurry zigzags between the clouds, and from the clouds to the ground below them. The wind began to howl. Friedrich rose and ran to the edge of the hill, facing the rest of the camp spread out below him. "All hands secure your loads. Anchor your tents. We will have to ride out the storm," he yelled loudly, trying to combat the wind. Wolfgang stared down the opposite side of the hill, with a stone expression on his face. "Friedrich!" he screamed. Friedrich ran over to him and looked down at the steep, rocky hillside below them. He couldn't make out what it was at first, but then he saw them. Men in green, gray, white, and red tunics slowly coming up the hillside, taking rocky paths, trying to make their way up to them. One group in particular was within a minute of their location, long spears and strong bows at the ready. Wolfgang continued to stare straight down at them, petrified, for a few more seconds. "How long until the men can get up here?" he finally managed to ask, his voice quivering slightly. Friedrich gaped in horror at the size of the army below them. Then he turned suddenly and sprinted to the other side of the hilltop. "Men of Nightland, sons of Eclipse City, we are under attack! Gather your weapons and rally to the hilltop!" he shouted, trying to hide his panic. The men began to look around in confusion. Some continued to bring their belongings into their tents before the rain began to fall. The clouds were directly over them now, the wind howling like a tyrant. Lightning struck the campfire, causing the burning logs to scatter, almost knocking Friedrich off the edge from the blast. "My lord!" Wolfgang screamed as he ran to him, to make sure he didn't fall off the edge. Friedrich started to catch his balance, then bellowed, "Did you not hear me, lads? The time for war is now! The enemy is here! Rally to the hilltop before they overtake us all like the storm!" At that moment a crack of thunder sounded as another flash of lightning illuminated the entire mountain, the strike branching down around them, arcing down in bluish-white branches. Then the rain started pouring down, soaking everything, dousing the once flaming pieces of the campfire that had scattered around them. One of the enemies carrying a banner reached the top. Taking one last steep step, the soldier tossed the banner on the ground and drew his sword from its scabbard. He darted forward, attempting to catch Friedrich off guard. Friedrich turned and slashed his sword upward to block the blow, then stabbed his sword through his opponent's heart. He stared for a moment at his victim, until he saw the lightning flash in his victim's eyes, and took his sword out of him. The soldier moaned as he fell. He laid on the ground with his head and hands dangling over the edge of the cliff, his sword falling into the ravine below, reflecting bits of light as it whirled until it finally disappeared from sight. More enemy troops were finishing their climb and began to charge at Wolfgang and Friedrich. Wolfgang and Friedrich moved to the center of the hilltop, charging at their enemies. Wolfgang kicked forward with such a force he knocked one of his enemies off balance, causing them to tumble into a rolling fall until they fell off the side of the cliff they came from. They fought like lions, matching blow for blow, picking off their opponents one by one. Wolfgang saw more enemy troops finishing their climb, and swung his sword around, catching his foes off guard, slicing two in the stomach and one in the upper chest, breaking their light chainmail armor, killing them. "Where the hell is our reinforcements?" Wolfgang asked as he began clashing swords with an enemy knight in partial plate armor. Friedrich began looking around frantically, trying to fight off more enemy blows, but saw no one. Then, in a surge of panic, he saw something that caught his eye. A person was emerging from the enemy forces. They wore a dusty coat of plate armor, which appeared to fit into the shape of his body. The person wielded a heavy bastard sword, which had a long, curved handle at the end of it, as though it was the tail of a dragon. Long black hair streamed out of the back of the person's helmet, which curved around the person's head with narrow visor slits in the front of it, just enough for a person to see the action in front of them. Friedrich continued to fight, but was beginning to lose his strength. He saw the person come closer, raising their sword in front of them, as though they were about to execute someone. Friedrich killed the nearest enemy on his right, then saw at a glance what he deemed a miracle. "Soldiers of Nightland, forward unto glory, unto victory!" he heard one of the sergeants yell above the wind and rain. The soldiers now echoed a charge that sounded across the entire valley below them as they finally joined the fight. Friedrich, distracted for a moment, took a blow to his left side. He jolted to his right in pain, then made eye contact with the person who cut him, and darted his sword just under their armor into their stomach, then back out again. The plated knight was now only an arm's length away. "Fool, you cannot defeat us all," the knight bellowed, clearly a man. He raised his sword again and chopped it down, attempting to strike Friedrich. Friedrich stepped back, then darted his sword at his opponent. They continued to cross swords. Wolfgang was separated from Friedrich during the struggle with the knight and was attempting to fight off 10 of the enemy soldiers at once. He only glanced up when he crossed swords with one of the troops to his left to see Friedrich losing strength in his fight with the knight. Friedrich screamed out and darted his sword at the plated knight's chest, but the knight caught the sword with his left hand. The knight knocked Friedrich over with a single shove, laughing mockingly. He took Friedrich's sword with both hands and broke it in half by snapping it on his knee. Friedrich got up to the fight with his hands, but he knew it was futile. Friedrich kicked and threw punches at the knight, who just stood there and took them in. He waited for Friedrich to run out of breath before he raised his sword so the tip touched Friedrich's chest. The knight chuckled, then drove his sword through Friedrich's chest. Wolfgang saw through his fight the expression of utter terror on Friedrich's face as he fell forward, clutching his chest. "No!" he screamed in horror. Wolfgang began to push through the enemy soldiers that continued to surround him, attempting to rush to get to his fallen friend, but he got caught up in a struggle, and someone used the hilt of their sword to strike Wolfgang on the back of his head. There was a crack, like the breaking of a pickaxe on a small rock. Wolfgang felt pain, then began to see sparks in his eyes. Then everything went black. Chapter 2 is called Awake, O Sleeper. Alright, that was a fairly intense intro to the story, but I hope that you enjoyed it and that you might decide to go look up the title of the book, maybe read a little bit more. Once again, the title of the book is called The Nightland Knights, Firebranded. It is available and out there around the world. Probably the best place to find it would be Amazon, but yeah. This book was self-published in 2019, and it took a lot of effort, a lot of error fixing, and a little bit of translations that had to be done for a different language, because there is a little bit of German in here towards the end. But all in all, it was a very good and very enriching and enlightening experience. And I hope that if you continue to read this book, that you'll find it to be a very inspirational and very well, I don't really want to say intense for the whole book, but there's a lot of tense scenes in it. A lot of action, a lot of adventure. And I think that you might enjoy it. So once again, I am Patrick Currier, also known as Sir Patrick 1C. Thank you for watching this video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Thanks for watching.